An alarm is announced at the center. Clark finds Brad and Amy and sets up a guard. However, Winston manages to escape. Amy overhears a conversation about his danger and realizes that she sees what surrounds Winston. She volunteers to help in the search, and the group departs for the highway where an attack on a driver has just occurred. Brad inspects the victim's car and finds Layla's documents inside. It turns out she was being transported to the center on Clark's orders. He launches into a fight, but then Amy says she sees trees, a cottage, and a woman, and leads people in the right direction. Meanwhile, at the center, Nicole tells Jonas about Amy's scream she saw in a recording. Turns out the girl is stronger than Fanning, and she suggests trying to make a vaccine from the girl's blood. At this time, in the parallel world of virulence, Fanning finds Winston and orders him to kill Amy. But Layla, having escaped from the agent's car, reaches the cottage first and tries to help the woman bitten by Winston. In the morning, the woman regains consciousness, and Layla, puzzled, sees that her neck is intact, and she feels perfectly fine. Then she tries to attack Layla, but Clark's people burst in and open fire. The vampire does not react. Then a man opens the curtains, and the woman burns under the sun's rays. Amy issues another series of visions, and everyone rushes to the water pumping station. Meanwhile, at the center, Nicole suddenly sees Shona, who promises to kill her. The woman informs Jonas that their assumption did not work. Fanning's virus turned out to be stronger than Amy's virus, and then Jonas decides to kill all the virulence while they still can. Meanwhile, soldiers enter the water pumping station building, where people bitten by Winston are hiding. The criminal himself breaks out of the building and attacks the guard despite the sunlight. The soldiers destroy those turned by him inside the station, and Amy realizes that the desire to kill her forced the vampire out into the light, and she runs into the forest. Winston follows her. The girl leads him to a hangar, and when the monster finally catches her, Brad arrives and kills Winston. Clark then admits his wrongdoing. Here comes Gilder and asks Amy to go with him. An agent escorts her and receives a blow to the back of the head. Nicole and Jonas prepare to turn on powerful lamps in the cells, but seeing Gilder's return, the woman goes to meet him to stall for time. Jonas turns on the lamps, the vampires scream, and suddenly Amy starts to feel a sharp pain. Nicole realizes that she reacts to the lamps and rushes to Jonas. The scientists confirm that the virulence are connected to each other. At night, Brad regains consciousness in the trunk of a car and sees Layla tied up like him. The minister appoints Gilder as the head of the project. Nicole informs Clark, who worries for his missing friend and his wife. Brad manages to free himself and devise a plan for escape. When the car stops, an agent jumps out of the trunk, throws one fighter into the lake, and shoots another with his own pistol, after which he releases Layla. Later, Clark arrives at the location, but the agent is already gone. Over the radio, he warns his friend of a possible tale. At this time in her reality, Amy is visited by Carter, who informs her that Fanning is afraid of her. He teaches her to create her own reality. In the forest, Brad and Layla are caught in the crosshairs of a cleaner, but they are saved by Clark, who apologizes for past sins, as he did not know what Gilder had planned. He hides the pair in the trunk of his car and heads to Noah. At the center, Amy creates her own reality with her living mother and spends time with her, complaining about problems. But the woman encourages the girl, as a difficult path lies ahead. Then there's a knock at the door, and opening it, Amy sees Fanning on the doorstep. The girl does not want to talk to him. He is surprised by the convincing simulation she has created. In reality, Amy shows no signs of life, and she is taken to the laboratory. An angry Gilder appoints his deputy Martinez as the head of security and announces to the staff the closure of the project. Meanwhile, in a parallel world, Amy refuses to be part of Fanning's family. He leaves, and Amy awakens to find her hands shackled. She is in a glass cage surrounded by vampires. Clark and Brad capture Gilder, and taking his key, they descend to level 4B. Brad finds Amy, but she refuses to have the shackles removed because she fears being dangerous. Clark sees how Gray destroys the communication node, cutting off the center from the world. The cleaner admits that it was Fanning's order. Nicole and Layla launch another series of experiments with Amy's blood. The girl herself, in a parallel reality, meets Fanning again, who explains that she is being reborn, which is why she feels everyone around her. At this time, Clark demands explanations from Gilder, but he had not given any permissions to Greg. Most likely it was an order from Martinez. but Gilder does not know where he is now. Clark starts searching the premises. Amy comes to and loses a tooth. But later, she returns to the simulation where Fanning gives her a bicycle. He tries to convince the girl that there is nothing bad in being reborn, while in reality, doctors are fighting for her life. Meanwhile, Clark cannot find Martinez and his men and realizes that Gilder's assistant is one of the virulents who can create his own reality. Now having access to all codes, he can easily open all doors of the center. Clark goes to gather the guards when Shona appears to him in the elevator. She insists that without her help, the man cannot be saved. He kisses her, but warns that he will kill her as soon as he can. Meanwhile, Gray, scraping his hands to blood, frees himself and heads to level 4B. Nicole's experiment yields positive results. This means that although Amy will be reborn, she will not become a vampire. The doctor begins to manufacture the vaccine when Gray locks the doors to her laboratory and knocks out Layla. At this time in the simulation, Fanning convinces Amy to ride through the tunnel to complete the rebirth. In reality, Nicole informs Brad that she is locked in the laboratory and explains that now it all depends on Amy. In the simulation, the girl enters the tunnel, and in reality, Brad tells her about his love and support and allows her to leave if she needs to. In the tunnel, Amy remembers everything she has been through, turns the bicycle around, and rides past Fanning while the cleaner opens the virulence cages. The girl regains consciousness, and the agent carries her out of the level while the other monsters emerge from their cages. The agent manages to lock the elevator doors. The monsters bang on it, but he leaves with Amy and finds Layla. Brad informs Nicole that Amy has withstood the rebirth and does not feel a thirst for blood. Clark gathers all the survivors in the hall when Jonas realizes that Fanning has indeed achieved a collective mind of the 12 virulents. Although the girl is not a monster, she is reborn. At this time, Fanning tells Amy the same thing and demands that she help the family get out, but Amy refuses to recognize them as her family. Meanwhile, people reboot the system to unlock the elevator indoors, and the monsters quiet down. Nicole asks to be left locked up, as the main thing is to get Amy out of there. But then it becomes clear that the virulents are escaping through the ventilation shafts. People fail to leave. A massacre begins. The agent manages to pull out several people, but Layla ends up bitten. Brad knows that Nicole has made the medicine and refuses to leave his wife. The few survivors hide in one room while Brad goes for Nicole. And Jonas, after hearing Amy's story about the tunnel, realizes that although Fanning did everything he could, the girl remained human. Clark contacts Nicole and explains how to hack the security panel. She manages to do it, but then Shona bursts into the room. She transitions to a parallel world and reports on Fanning's plan to get out and devour the whole world. But just as the vampire is about to add something, a gunshot is heard. Brad has reached the laboratory. The wounded Shona escapes. The agent, grabbing the drug, locks themselves with Nicole in one of the cages. The virulents discover them, but cannot penetrate inside. Fanning calls Amy again and informs her that according to the protocol, the block will simply be blown up. Therefore, she must prevent this. Amy runs into her reality, where Carter finds her and persuades her to make a decision. Taking advantage of the argument between Clark and Jonas, Amy goes to the computer and initiates the protocol to destroy the center. At that moment, Clark is shown an old ventilation shaft, and he informs Brad about it. Nicole forces the agent to leave with the medicine while she delays the virulence. Brad barely escapes outdoors as an explosion sounds below. Later, Layla is given the medicine and she recovers. However, after a while, Amy reports hearing monsters. They are alive and coming after them. The survivors navigate their way to the exit. The medicine is handed over to Brad, hoping he can reach the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. They have to fight off their reborn colleagues, but bullets only work for a short time. Clark receives a wound and is left lying under a tree. Amy gets caught by Fanning. Suddenly, she finds herself in another reality where she is feeding the dying monster under the tree with her blood. The girl returns but cannot explain where she was or what she did. Suddenly, a car driven by Lacey appears in front of the family. She had promised to protect Amy. Brad, Layla, and Amy drive away, while Clark is found by Shona and taken to her reality, but the man refuses to be reborn. That night, one world ended and a new one was born. Meanwhile, Lacey makes her way to the center, killing the bitten along the way. She finds Jonas, who is about to end his life, but she reminds him that he has to fix everything he caused. 30 days later, Brad's family is hiding in the dense forests of Oregon. The agent teaches the girl how to fish, make fire, and survive. One day, Brad and Layla go out for supplies, listening to a broadcast about the fall of Houston, the fourth major city overrun by the infected. They wait for the promised helicopter from the CDC, but it never seems to come. Reaching civilization on their own seems impossible. On their way, they meet their neighbor Bob, but he has no new information to offer. The couple stops at a gas station when Layla is attacked by an infected. The agent manages to shoot it, and a young man emerges. He and his mother are surviving in the store premises. The young man tracks the death toll based on chat messages. Observing the most dangerous areas, Brad realizes that the virulence have dispersed into homes. Meanwhile, Clark is involved in screening refugees, helping to identify those infected, while Lacey and Jonas reach the CDC, where they learn the world blames America and refuses to engage in negotiations. In the cabin in the woods, Layla realizes that no helicopter will come and decides to set out on foot to deliver the medicine, since she managed to heal. Brad and Amy remain alone. The agent teaches the girl archery, and when she shows reluctance, he explains she might end up completely alone and could only depend on herself. Amy starts to take the lessons seriously. One day, Amy herself summons Fanning. She wants the monster to know that she will never join his family. In response, he mockingly shows her the infected Bob, implying now he must be killed. Later, neighbors come to Brad's house in search of Bob. Amy has to admit that the man is infected and is in the yard. Brad goes outside, but Bob asks to be killed in the forest, and the agent agrees. However, Bob turns, attacks him, and bites him. Meanwhile, world leaders agree to negotiations. Jonas is also expected to attend and assure that the medicine will soon be ready. But words without action concern no one, especially since the collapse of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention became known. So, the world concludes. Communication screens go dark one after the other. People realize that America will be bombed. At this time, Amy tries to help Brad, and when the neighbors are about to shoot the infected, she suddenly turns into a monster and attacks the people. Afterwards, she administers the medicine to Brad and writes a farewell note. Later, Brad comes to, but the girl is gone. American cities turn into ruins while the reborn continue to devour the few that remain. Amy easily defeats them with her bow, searching for those who remained human, and she hopes to find Brad. This story of vampires whose nature is the work of humans themselves suggests that humanity will eventually go too far and release a deadly genie from the bottle.